I love The Legend of Dragoon. It is tied with Final Fantasy VII and The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask as my favorite game of all time, a title it has held ever since I first saw it. This is a kinda long personal story, so let's start at the beginning. When I was 3 years old, I went to visit my cousin Gaston. I found him playing on his PS1 and here I am. The Legend of Dragoon quickly became a classic in the family, alongside Crash Bandicoot 1, which he also had, and Final Fantasy VII, courtesy of my other cousin Nico. Back then we used to play Dragoon mostly at my grandma's house whenever there was nothing on TV. And I do mean that it became a classic in the family. My aunts can still quote double slash and name characters whenever they remember the game. Time passed. We got new consoles, new games, into PC gaming, emulation. But The Legend of Dragoon and Final Fantasy VII endured above most. And that's in part due to our issues playing the games. Like, we really liked them, yeah, the gameplay, the music, everything was fantastic. But in both games we'd hit a part where we'd be stranded for very long. In Final Fantasy VII, it was due to our inability to find the Lunar Heart, a key item needed to get to the second disc. Oh, that's a good point to remark that this whole story happens in Chile in the early 2000s. None of us understood English, the internet we had was super slow, and we couldn't find great guides. But The Legend of Dragoon had a different issue. The second disc was lost. The Legend of Dragoon has 4 discs, and the loss of the second disc meant that any new save file could only get through the first disc. It also meant that files on the third and fourth discs had it hard for backtracking. Many locations are stored in the disc they're narratively needed for, and you must cross these locations to backtrack. So unless you got the late game flying ship, a lot of the game was lost. We all had our PS1s hacked, or unlocked as we called it since it was such a common practice over here, so we could theoretically get a cracked disc too. But Dragoon was especially hard to get a cracked copy of, so we did long for a chance to play the full game again. Until my cousins got the cracked copy from a friend of theirs, and they could beat the game. And for the record, a classmate of Tommy, Nico's younger brother, knew where the Lunar Harp was and they could beat Final Fantasy VII, even though the third disc was scratched or bugged to hell and frozen like half of all attacks. This was how things were for my cousins though. As a kid, my cousins didn't lend these games to me that easily. So once my cousins got the cracked copies of Dragoon, I asked them to copy me some discs. But this is when they started going out with their friends more often, so they weren't very available. Nor did I know anyone who could help me with this. So I could only play 7 when Nico allowed it, which was almost never, but eventually he agreed to it. As for Dragoon, Gaston eventually was able to copy me a cracked disc 1, which was prone to freezing and was very hard to get running. Can't blame him for that though. It was the same cracked copy he was stuck with. But hold on, why did he have this issue since he had the original disc 1 for Dragoon? Like I said before, Dragoon was hard to crack on PS1, and it worked both ways. Hard to get a cracked copy of, and couldn't play the original disc on an unlocked PS1. Gaston waited to unlock his PS1 until we got the cracked discs of Dragoon. He was the last to unlock it. Original discs were rare and expensive, and he wanted to share all the cracked ones that were commonly available around here. Eventually we got PS2s and the retrocompatibility was awesome. I played a ton of both games on the OG discs. But I still didn't know where the Lunar Harp was since Tommy forgot himself, and Dragoon's disc 2 was still missing. Also the OG disc 1 had a scratch that froze the game if you tried doing Dragoon attacks. Yay. But anyway, I still had a blast playing the crap out of both games in their respective disc 1s. No clue what the dialogue meant, even though I did learn some basic English thanks to them. But to me, it was all about the gameplay. I know JRPGs get a pass for most people, but come on, I'm controlling a team of badass warriors in actually spectacular combat with awesome magic and coolest techniques. Limit breaks made my jaw drop from Braver alone, Meteor Rain and all the others blew my mind. Dragoon magics are a spectacle to this day, and the first time I managed to land an addition, I got the sweetest of chills. At some point, definitely before I had a chance to play Dragoon myself, Gaston got a demo disc that had a demo of the Legend of Dragoon. He was super hyped over it since it gave the available characters their Dragoon spirits far earlier than in the actual game. But got bummed out once he realized the characters were all at low levels and couldn't just nuke everything. So he decided to grind out the additions and magics he wanted. I was watching him and Tommy play, as usual, and he asked me, since I always wanted to play, if I could get all the Dragoon magics while they went for a snack, or something ridiculous like that. Maybe it was all the additions. Of course, being like my first time playing by myself, I spent a ton of time checking menus and almost died without making any progress. By the time they came back, Gaston overdramatically mocked my work. The typical pranking stuff he did on me. And I just decided to keep watching them play. I think I asked him if his plan was even possible since the XP seemed to barely advance. And he told me, you could get everything to max level if you just kept at it. If I remember correctly. I think this is the moment where I learned about the concept of grinding. Until then, I saw the gameplay as enough of a reason to keep getting into random battles. But now I learned that I could unlock stuff if I kept fighting, earlier than intended, without leaving the current area. Once I could play on my own, I practiced additions to hell and back. Just doing them was everything for me, and because of this, I got into far too many battles and got a ton of experience. Until I eventually got all of Lavitz's additions. I shared this with Gaston and he told me that to get the final edition, I had to get all additions to max level by doing them 80 times each, which I did shortly after. I think that was the first time my cousin saw Flower Storm done by Lavitz, at least in person. Proud and full of confidence, I told Gaston that since I was stuck in disc 1, I might as well do the same with Dart's additions. And he just laughed. He knew very well how hard that would be. He had gotten well into disc 3 before. To give him credit, I wasn't really a grinder back then. I would get bored and my PS1 wasn't very reliable for long grinding. It wouldn't turn on unless the power cable was bent at the right angle, struggled to start up. The disc I had was scratched and could freeze, so I had to save often, which would also get old. And going for long without saving was just tempting fate. All of these issues were solved when we got into emulators. I had my start with Visual Boy Advance thanks to Tommy, and then Project 64 from Tommy and from another friend of mine. And eventually I found PSX Fin when I was like 13, on which I played the cracked disc 1 I had all this time, and a while after I found the ROM files for all the discs of The Legend of Dragoon. I shared them with my cousins and we finally could enjoy the game without issues. Fast forward many years later, I began streaming at 19. I started streaming with Final Fantasy VII, went with Majora's Mask shortly after, got through several games from my childhood, and once my first anniversary of streaming was coming, I decided to celebrate with the most fitting game, The Legend of Dragoon. Not long before, my little brother had bought Tommy's PS3, and in it, I bought The Legend of Dragoon from the PlayStation Network. It didn't have the small oddities and glitches from the emulated versions, it was more authentic to the PS1 version. So I went with it for the anniversary stream, even got a capture card for it. So yeah, I played the game on stream, telling all the stories I had with it, my history with my cousins, the issues I had to get it running, my memories from previous playthroughs, and then I reached disc 4. It hit me. I was actually gonna beat The Legend of Dragoon. Yeah, even after all the hell I went through to be able to play the game, after having all the discs on emulator ready to go, I just never beat it. I would just get far into the game, grind for a bit, go to something else, and eventually restart it. This was not my first time doing such things, by the way. I had done this in Final Fantasy VII a few times before. I found guides for the Lunar Harp, rest in peace Base Avalancha. Got through all of Disc 2 and into Disc 3, both on PS2 and emulator, and just chose to not beat the game. My take is that my history of not being able to beat these games made me satisfied with never beating them. And probably it was paired with me seeing my cousins not playing them nearly as much once they beat them. It made me afraid of getting the feeling of finality once I beat them, of not wanting to play them anymore, and resetting near the end gave me the perfect excuse to keep playing, as I still had to beat them. It's so fun in retrospective. This mindset lasted until I was 18. It was a mix of friends online who had beaten both 7 and Dragoon, and kept playing them often, and Gaston himself after he had replayed Dragoon recently, who managed to convince me that my fears weren't true. It took some wrestling with the habit, but I finally did it. I finally beat Final Fantasy VII. And not only did it feel like a massive breath of fresh air, as well as being a way easier final boss than I expected, but I have replayed it several times, different challenge runs, gimmick runs, and classic casual runs alike, and it has only gotten better with each playthrough. So now that I was no longer worried about beating the games, I was finally gonna do it with The Legend of Dragoon. And so I did. For my first anniversary of streaming, I beat The Legend of Dragoon for the very first time. As expected, I have replayed the game a good couple of times, including a cheese run where I got super OP items as early as I could, and of course I keep thinking about new ways to enjoy this game. But today I got a different challenge run, and it's one I often consider boring. At least I did until I watched a documentary on YouTube of someone else doing the same challenge for a different game. And this person, it was just straight up inspiring. The challenge is to reach the maximum level in the first area of the game, where you can save and have random encounters. And that's what I'm doing in the Legend of Dragoon now. I will get Dart to the maximum level of 60 in the forest outside Celis. By the way, now that I said that, there's this little patch of overworld between Celis and Forest. And yeah, the forest is just called Forest. And this is technically the first place with saving and random encounters. But I consider the forest itself to be fair game since the enemies are the same in both areas. The only differences are that in the overworld you can only find enemies alone, and in the forest you can find them in pairs. And the other difference is that this piece of overworld is so stupid small, it's so easy to bump into either Forest or Celis by accident while running around, and that's just annoying. I started this challenge in 2021. Yeah, it has been a while. I have been in and out of it, but it has been a very enjoyable ride. I have learned a lot thanks to this challenge. I literally did things I dreamed of as a kid. For once, I wanted to make a website to document this whole challenge, adding updates along the way, and that's how I found NeoCities. I learned some basic HTML and CSS, and here it is. Yeah, it's far from perfect, but you can see I've had a lot of fun with it. Link in the description. In there you can read from the beginning of this challenge up to now, and through all the thoughts I had in between. Anyway, we're now actually in the challenge. I sat down and ran around in circles for hours upon hours on end. Not very consistently and, in retrospective, super sloppily, but I was doing progress. After a while, I unlocked Burning Rush, Dart's 3rd edition. Typically unlocked at the halfway point of Disc 1. A neat way to know that I'm making progress. Kept grinding and eventually, I got Crush Dance, my favorite edition and the last one I get in Disc 1. After this I started getting pretty fast at getting levels. I learned to grind multitask and didn't even notice some fights. So I kept on going, and eventually did something that I legit thought was insane as a kid. I unlocked Madness Hero, Dart's 5th edition. Let me tell you why this was so insane for me. Back when I was stuck in Disc 1, I had very little to do but grind. That's why I got all of Lavitz's editions. And while I did want to unlock all of Dart's editions, I never could due to all the issues I said before, and me being bad at optimizing the grind. Like not knowing that the XP was split between the party members, losing track of the XP I was getting, and picking a terrible place to grind because the individual enemies gave more XP, even though the encounter rate was abysmal. Crush Dance is unlocked at level 15, and I think the highest level I got in Disc 1 as a kid was 17 or so. Madness Hero is unlocked at level 22. When I found this out, knowing how hard I had it to get a single level, I ended up feeling that the game was just reducing my XP gain to make it way too hard. So...
Yes! Go! Madness Hero!
To see Madness Hero unlocked in this one was fantastic.
Madness Hero!
And not only was it on Disc 1, it was in Forest, right outside of Celis, the very beginning of the game. This unlock alone was basically a taste of the whole challenge. I used to think that getting to this point was impossible in Disc 1, and now that I got there, I know I got what it takes to see this challenge to the end. And so, I kept grinding. Days went by, weeks, months, the hours on the in-game clock went past 100, and then I unlocked Moonstrike, the last edition Dart can learn through level ups. You know what this means. I charged ahead and did it 80 times, pure hype behind each attack. Well, actually it was more focused. Moonstrike has one of the hardest counterattacks in the game, so I fumbled a ton. But eventually, I did it. I unlocked Blazing Dynamo, Dart's Ultimate Edition.
Blazing Dynamo!
Like I promised as a kid, I got all of Dart's editions in Disc 1. Throughout this challenge, the main reference of progress has been the addition unlocks. On top of being what I always wanted to do as a kid, it made the progress feel more noticeable. But I legit got everything that I could from leveling up. After this, XP wise, it's just levels and nothing else. I unlocked all additions Dart has, and he has the most in the game, and I am not even a quarter of the way through. Oh, that's a good segue. Moonstrike is unlocked at level 29, and I got Blazing Dynamo before level 30 by the way, so one could say, But if the max level is 60, then you already got past the first quarter, level 15. And if you said that, then maybe you're not familiar with levels in JRPGs. Levels are reached by obtaining an amount of total experience points gained from battles, and this amount increases with each level. So, to find the halfway point and anything of the like, you gotta calculate using the total XP needed to reach the maximum level. In Dart's case, this amount is 382,000. So, if I divide it into quarters, it gives us these numbers. And look, I'ma round up these numbers to the closest hundred of thousands, so it's easier to keep track of. In the grand scheme of things, the difference is minuscule. So, working with 100, 200, and 300,000, our quarter marks land around levels 40, 50, and 56. So yeah, level 60 divided in 4 is not 15, 30, 45, and 60. It is roughly 40, 50, 56, and 60. Which is a good display of how much XP is needed between the later levels. You need as much XP to cover the first 40 levels as you need for the last 4. Again, roughly speaking. So yeah, at the point I unlock all XP leveling rewards, I was over 10 levels away from the first quarter mark of the challenge. And just for the record, I often struggle to unlock Moonstrike by the half of Disc 3. Now that I mentioned the XP, I might as well share my notes on grinding. You tend to notice stuff like this after 100 hours having the same battles. I concluded that the third screen of the forest has the best overall yield of both XP and items. There are more screens in the forest, but I need to trigger a one-time cutscene to get to those, and I want to progress as little as possible. Another metric of progress I hope will be achievable is getting the stats of Dart so high that he stops taking any damage at all. And that would actually be very useful since I do need to take a couple of turns to heal from time to time. And it doesn't matter if he has over 3000 HP, he has gotten down to under 100 simply by getting slapped literally thousands of times. And I do mean I hope it's possible. I literally don't know if the base stats will be enough. I've been taking 1 HP from these fucking chickens for hundreds of hours now. Equipment upgrades really seem to matter in this game. And yeah, one can totally say that this whole challenge is dumb. I mean, not only am I mindlessly repeating the most basic gameplay in this game to get the numbers as high as possible, but I'm directly going against the game's efforts to keep a good pace and a balanced and fun gameplay. I'm not the first person to do this kind of challenge, in the slightest, and I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not the first one to do it in this game. Hell, I'd believe you if you told me that someone else already did it in that patch of overworld that I dismissed. The Lane of Dragoon has some insane fans. Challenge runs, deep dives into hidden and scrapped content, plenty of mods, you name it. I mean, besides the original release, this game has only gotten re-releases like this one in PS3 and the one on PS5, and I think on PS4. On the official aspect, the game has been the same ever since it came out, and rarely does it ever get any recognition, besides Astrobot's cameo of Dart. That's pretty cute, I like it. And honestly, I don't really mind. The fanbase has been alive with no support at all. And even with some fans asking for a remake or sequels and whatnot, I'm fine if they don't happen even after I die. I mean, I'd be glad for them if it happens, but I myself think we got a wonderful little gem here that stands strong by itself. In fact, if we do get anything like remakes and sequels, I expect Sony to fuck it up and botch the entire thing. Although I do recognize that it has the same sequel potential as Final Fantasy, but anyway, we keep at it with what we have. We have been doing double slashes for over 20 years, and we're not getting tired of it anytime soon. In the end, I do these kinds of challenges to express my love for these games, as well as to find more ways to enjoy them, which is a symbiotic absolute win. But love them enough to go this far, hundreds of hours in a single challenge, playing for over 2 decades, replaying so much. And honestly, yeah, at least in my opinion, these games have been such a wonderful influence in my life. I mentioned at the start that The Lane of Dragoon, Final Fantasy VII, and The Lane of Zelda Majora's Mask are tied as my favorite games of all time. And that's of course due to their own merits, but I also think these games kinda shaped me into who I am right now. Why did I fall in love with art, with drawing, with playing music, dreaming of making animations, writing, making games? Hell, I can even give it to these games the fact that I'm here making videos now. It may be a stretch and you could say that I'm being overdramatic, but I do genuinely believe that. I mean, why else would I willingly do this kind of challenge? The act of getting Dart to max level in the forest outside Celis is just a silly little challenge by itself. One could see it as meaningless, but like every time I play these games and fall in love with them all over again, it absolutely means a lot to me. Like a great man once said, the act itself is meaningless. I give it meaning. I will see this challenge to the end, and you can bet I won't just stop there. It may take some time, but I will find new ways to love my fave games, even outside these 3. There's so much fun to have with so many wonderful games, even with just the basic everyday playthroughs. And as far as today's subject is concerned, it's gonna be fun. Also, fun little extra thing, 25% is higher than 16%, so yeah, get fucked, Dick3. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I wanted to make this video for a long while now, even stopped grinding near level 40 until I could get it done because I'm theatrical as fuck. Pretty dumb, but the consistency feels awesome. Shoutout to Cybershell for making the video an internet hero, documenting the story of Circle Master's grind to max level in the beginning of Final Fantasy VII. And of course, shoutout to Circle Master for the achievement, for inspiring me to do this challenge, and for the amazing story. Please go watch the video, it's just lovely. I think it's needless to say that this video is also a love letter to my family, my cousins for all the fun and for introducing me to these games. And overall, just a big hug to them. I'm planning to go back to streaming soon, revamped setup and all. And of course, I'll be grinding on stream from time to time. Hope to see you there. Massive thanks as always to my supporter on Coffee. Sy-step, you're amazing. Please consider supporting me on there if you like what I do. Thanks again for watching, hope to see you again, and have a good one.